talking about a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, do we need a conscious experience of the psychedelic journey or to profit from it? What would be your take on that point?
That's a very very important and interesting question. I'm sure that we need the conscious psychedelic experience to benefit from the treatment. I'm pretty sure. But I also know that there are companies out there who are which are working on drugs that have the same biological effects, 5-HT2A agonists, without creating the psychedelic experience, and that's an important experiment. You have to apply a psychedelic under general anesthesia. That would be the experiment to do. And I'm sure at some point somebody will do that experiment. You just have to convince an ethics committee that you can put someone in general anesthesia. But at some point, I think in China probably, or in the US, someone will do that experiment. But I'm personally very sure that the conscious experience is absolutely crucial, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Who wants to start?
We also have questions online, but here you go.
I want to sort of add on to that actually about what Chiara just asked about microdosing at the at the one before. And so I was wondering if you think that conscious experience is really that necessary, then would microdosing be expected not to be as helpful, or in a way, I don't know, or why is microdosing helpful, if at all, if the conscious experience is necessary?
That's also an important question, and it's related to Henrik's talk. When he was talking about the benefits, cognitive flexibility and so on, and openness. The question here is really, what is a valuable conscious state? That was in the first talk, a valuable conscious state. Microdosing, as proposed in Silicon Valley, or by some people also around now here in Germany, in podcasts, is in that concept is believed to increase performance, personal performance in professional life. That's exactly, I believe, that's exactly the mindset that leads to a mental health crisis, because it's exactly that this mindset disconnects you from your environment, that you just have your personal performance in mind, your a very conventional type of what to achieve in life. And I think that this kind of concept of microdosing is not very useful. But we have to get the data. We have to do the studies. The question is very much related to neuroenhancement. In neuroenhancement, 20 years ago or 10 to 15 years ago, we had a big discussion in the psychiatric community: is neuroenhancement ethical? Drugs for that are being used for neuroenhancement, like methylphenidate, they are usually used for treatment of for example, ADHD. In that case, they are used for treatment. Is it ethical to use these drugs to increase personal performance in healthy volunteers or in healthy people? That's really the question that is related to this, that's really something we have to debate here and in society.
Maybe building on that point, microdosing is not normally done under supervision, and well, you cannot be certain always that everyone that's microdosing is really under the dose that you don't really perceive any difference in your everyday life. So which one is helping and why?
Yeah, that's true. And do you think that microdosing...
Sorry, can you speak into the microphone?
Well, I took it forward. So do you see microdosing as a way of neuroenhancement, and therefore
yes,
do you think...
I think that's the concept. The concept is neuroenhancement, at least in Silicon Valley. And it's neuroenhancement, increased performance, increase professional performance. Be creative in a sense that you make more money to make to build the next Apple or Tesla, to create the next multi-billion company. That's the mindset behind that kind of microdosing. And for treatment purposes, nobody has evaluated it. It might be useful for treatment, but I believe, from my personal perspective, it's in our study, we will compare a high dose with a low dose, 25 milligrams of psilocybin with 5 milligrams. And that will also give a hint whether you need the high dose, the spiritual or the, I'm sorry, the psychedelic experience. We are having that discussion about spirituality all the time. If it's a biological effect, then the 5 milligram dose should have some effect. So we have to get the data. That's one of the, for me, one of the crucial questions behind psychedelic research. Do we need the psychedelic experience? I believe so, but it's just a belief. To do a comparison, for example, between a single high dose and a low dose for 6 weeks, that would be an interesting study.
We've got a question from somebody at home here. Do you agree that if we learn to stop identifying with the internal mental radio of the self, it will be a big step, especially for psychiatric patients, specifically for well-being development and a broader insight of consciousness?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
It's okay. It's a long question, so I'll repeat it. It took me a few reads too. Do you agree that if we learn to stop identifying with the mental radio of the self, it will be helpful, especially for psychiatric patients, in the context of well-being development and broader insight of consciousness?
I think it will be helpful. To stop the inner radio might be not possible, but what we do with all these techniques like meditation or mindfulness, that's basically we try to tune down this this mental radio, like the person calls it. So I think that's probably one of the side effects of psychedelic treatment, that it reduces this ruminating. I think the available studies show that rumination just is reduced by psychedelic treatment. And that's helpful.
Thank you.
And you can reach that also with meditation. And Franz Vollenweider has shown that if you combine the two techniques, you get very profound effects, which are stronger than of one of the single interventions.
Yes, Max, please.
So first of all, I would like to thank you for taking a stance for the role of healthy relationships and also the environment for mental health issues. I'm curious what you think about the potential role of psychedelics or the psychedelic experience in prevention. Because as Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is better than a ton of treatment.
At a certain point, I believe that healthy people should have legal access to psychedelics, because I think these drugs could have preventive effects. For me, the question is when to start with that kind of prevention. At what age, for example? I would not recommend to use these drugs for adolescents. That's a very important question. When do we start the prevention? I would suggest to think preventive early on when we raise children. We have a lot of preventive measures for when we educate and raise children. Without psychedelics. At a certain point, I believe, in our study, we start including patients at 25, not the usual age 18. We just want to be very safe, so we start at 25. That is because we just want to reduce the risk of inducing psychotic states. So at a certain point, I believe it has definitely, or it could have preventive effects. And I think, and I pointed this out in many interviews, which I gave to journalists over the last couple of months, that a psychedelic experience could be very beneficial also for not for healthy people. But that, for me, that's the next step. It's much easier to get these into patients, these drugs, before we get them to normals. But I'm sure that we will see that, we will reach that point.
Let's get a little bit more fundamental again. So you said consciousness is a mediator between the environment and the brain. That's what you said. Did you also say consciousness is a mediator between the environment, the brain, and the self?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah,
that's what I said.
So my question is, how far down the evolutionary line would you take that? Would you say that also more simple mammals and non-mammals have similar consciousness?
Oh yeah, I definitely don't believe in the concept that consciousness evolved with humans. There is this Dutch ethologist, monkey researcher, what's his name? Yeah, Franz Wahl. If you read his books, you really, after reading his books, you cannot believe any longer that consciousness evolved with humans. And he has not only done, I have seen various very impressive presentations by him with, for example, elephants. I think there's no doubt that some kind of consciousness is in other mammals. And I don't know where to stop, where to set the border between conscious and non-conscious creatures.
Thank you. I think back there's a question.
Yeah, you emphasize the
Yes.
you emphasize the importance of context and the environment in consciousness, but in clinical trials, it's actually the goal to eliminate contextual factors, so to improve efficacy. So how do you treat this problem in psilocybin trial?
Okay, in a double-blind trial, we have the same environment. That's why we do a double-blind controlled trial. That the environment is very important in clinical trials has been shown over the decades in psychopharmacology. For example, in all these trials with antidepressants or antipsychotics, it was shown that the difference between placebo and verum decreased, even in antipsychotic trials. So the placebo effect increased over time. And that's most likely an effect of how we treat patients in general, that the psychiatric treatment per se without drugs has become better and better and better over time. And that now it's hard, and that's one problem of the pharmaceutical industry. Now it's hard to show superiority of a new drug over placebo, because our placebo environment, placebo is all environmental factors. Our placebo environment is so good now. Yeah, and so we cannot erase placebo effects or effects of the environment. We can just do methodological sound studies in doing controlled trials, placebo-controlled trials, double-blind trials.
Thank you.
We just have a question to repeat the name of the scientist you just mentioned who studies consciousness in animals, including elephants.
Franz Wahl.
Franz Wag.
Yeah.
Anyone else back there?
How would psychedelics fit into the psychiatric landscape as it is, and
In the what
in the
landscape?
psychiatric landscape, how would they fit into psychiatry, and in what ways could they change psychiatry?
Wow, that's a very fundamental question. That I think it's a long and stepwise process. It has just begun. I come from the psychiatric establishment. I have been, that's why I'm a professor of psychiatry. You cannot become a professor at the University of Heidelberg if you are a psychonaut. So, at least not today. Maybe somewhere in the future. I'm discussing the psychedelics and how they could change the field. I have been discussing that for the last 2 years, just 2 years. And I have the feeling that something is changing. Even hardcore psychopharmacologists are now more open. When I discuss these issues, they are more open to at least try to understand what I'm saying. And so it's a long process of changing the thinking of and the concepts of mental disorders. We at the last year's DGPPN Congress, our psychiatry congress here in Berlin in November last year, we had a pro-con debate in a lecture hall with more than 500 people. The interest was enormous. I had the pro position, and an addiction specialist from the University of Göttingen had the contra position. And there was quite some controversial interaction. And at the end, the chairwoman asked the audience, now let's get an impression who won the debate. And she asked who would get treatment with a psychedelic from Professor Gründer. And about 90% of the people in the room raised their hands. So you just have to be persistent. You have to show the data. You have to do good clinical science, and you have to not only provide brain science, but put what we are doing here into a cultural context, and that's what we are doing here this afternoon.
So you see them rather as a substitute to conventional psychopharmaceuticals, and not as like a complement, which would be quite dangerous.
For the next 10 years, I see it as an addition to what we are doing. Last year at the ZE, a prominent psychedelic researcher from the UK gave a talk at ZE in Mannheim. And he said, everybody who administers an SSRI to patients should go to jail. And in 5 years, nobody will receive an SSRI anymore. And who still prescribes SSRIs should go to jail. So I don't think that's right. And it's not good for the discussion because what we have to do is we have to show that it's right now it's an attractive way of thinking different, complementing what we are already having, and then maybe in 10 years or maybe in 20 years, we will have a new valuation of the old drugs and the new drugs, and then we will see. There might still be patients who are not open enough. You have to be open for psychedelic treatment. There are certainly many patients who are not open enough to take a psychedelic. They might be doing better with a conventional SSRI. Millions of people are taking SSRIs every day in this country alone. So you cannot put them all on psychedelics from...
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for all your questions. Thank you, Gerhard. Looking forward to reading your book. If I might find an answer or more questions, we will see.